Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tonight is December 6th, and we'll call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. We will rise, and our lovely Nancy will lead us in the pledge today.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board members, may I have a motion and a second, please, to approve tonight's agenda as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Comments or questions? All those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Board members, may I have a motion, please, and a second, that the consent agenda as listed in your packet this evening also be approved?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you. We also have a treasurer's report this evening. May I please have a motion and a second that the treasurer's report for the month ending September 30th, 2022 be approved as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, questions or comments on that? All those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you. That moves us to special reports. We have several tonight.
We do. Just note that Dr. Maloney is not here. She's at a conference during this meeting, and people have noticed our district clerk, Kathleen, is not here. But in her place just for tonight is Nancy Bradstreet, who the board approves at the July reorg meeting to be the fill-in. So thank you so much, Nancy, for being here and helping out. I'll answer for her. She's so excited.
She is.
So we have a few special reports tonight. We do have our annual Medicaid compliance plan recertification that Marty Morrow is going to walk through. And then later in the agenda, the board has to take an action on that. And then we have our principal, Mrs. Watt, to go over the annual course description guide, which the board also acts on. And then this is our meeting where once a year we bring all of our building principals to take a look at our building priorities, sometimes in the past referred to as school action plans. And so Dr. Potter will present just an overview as a reminder of our district priorities, and then we'll turn over to all 6 of our building principals to present what's happening at K-5, middle school, and high schools. And so first we'll bring up Ms. Morrow. I think you're in their audience somewhere. Thank you. And the clicker should work for you. And I believe the next slide starts with your report.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just here to refresh the Medicaid compliance for Penfield School District. The SSHSP, actually I have to go back, is the School Supportive Health Services Program. And what that does is enable districts to have access to federal money for medically necessary related services provided to students who are Medicaid eligible and who have disabilities. We have an internal compliance committee that's made up of Scott Dreschler, Bill Maloney, and myself. We meet quarterly just to review our the alerts that New York State sends out, the practices that we have within Penfield, and also to review our compliance plan, which you all should have gotten a copy of. The each building has a poster that has the waste, fraud, and abuse information if you need to address any concerns. That's in all the schools and the administrative building, and also in our newsletter and on our website. Scott would be the point of contact, and then the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General would also be someone to contact if you have any concerns. So these are the billable services for Medicaid. They have to be on a student's IEP. And in Penfield, we just bill for the first 3 because Medicaid, it kind of functions the same way as it does in a doctor's office. And the way the recording and tracking of services is quite different in a doctor's office than it is in the school district. So as a matter of efficiency and most effective process, we bill for the first 3. The first thing that we have to have is our parental consent to bill for our services. So they sign a one-time consent. And then the order or prescriber has to be enrolled in a program that is a statewide program that basically says that they will comply with Medicaid practices. And any of the internal speech pathologists that we have in district are all enrolled in that program. The provider qualifications, we have to have a certified and licensed therapist for speech, OT, and PT, and or they have to be one of these teacher of speech and hearing handicapped, or teacher of students with speech and language disabilities, or physical therapist assistant or an occupational therapy assistant working under the direction of someone who's certified and licensed. The NPI is the National Provider Identifier, which is basically a database that contains a 10-digit number for each prescriber, and they maintain their personal information, but the only number that's given out is something that doesn't really mean anything to most people, though, so it doesn't give out their personal identifiable information. Every provider has to be checked before they can work with our students. We check on an exclusion list to be sure that they have not been charged with fraud or abuse or anything. And so that is checked. Anytime I see a new name on our list, I check to see, and we have another person in district who checks that as well. So then we also have agencies that we work together with, such as Mary Cariola or the School of the Deaf, and they have to sign an agreement every year and a statement of reassignment that allows us to bill for the services that their providers provide to our students, and also stating that they'll comply with the Medicaid practices. So these are all the requirements of a Medicaid claim. The student has to be eligible for Medicaid. The parental consent has to be obtained by the district. The qualified prescriber, in other words, the doctor or the person that writes the script, has to be qualified. The service has to be on the IEP as a related service. The order has to be follow the requirements of Medicaid. There's a list of that. The notes have to have certain requirements, and they have to be written within 72 hours of the session. The sessions have to meet IEP requirements. In other words, they have to follow the frequency and the ratio, the 1-to-1 or group ratio. And then there's codes, the CPT code, which is the type of service that's provided individual or group, and the billable code, which is the ICD-10 code, has to do with the student's disability. And then the provider, the therapist, has to also meet the social SSHSP requirements. And the bottom line is we process everything through Frontline. So Frontline has to keep up with their agreement with the state as well. Okay, so one of the requirements for us to be able to get Medicaid reimbursement is the cost report. Part of that is what they call a random moment time study. So there's actually random moments that are emailed to our speech pathologists, and they have 48 hours to respond to that email and say what they were doing at that exact moment in time. So that's part of the fact that we get any kind of reimbursement. This report is due just about every December 31st. This year it's due a week later. I'm currently working on the 21-22 school year cost report. It counts all students who receive any Medicaid eligible service, as well as the students that are Medicaid eligible for those services. We also have to report on the payroll and benefits for our in-district providers and provide a list of any supplemental providers from BOCES and our agencies that are in agreement with us. And then we have administrative costs that our business office reports. And we go through documentation audits. So I've been through audits with BOCES and our internal auditor, and they just make sure that we've got all the documentation that Medicaid requires of us. And so far, we've done all right with that. Do you have any questions?
Board members, questions? Mark, yeah.
I have one comment. There's a lot involved. You went through all the things that are involved there, and there's a lot of administrative cost. And there was points in time in the past where we looked at administrative costs versus the reimbursement we're actually getting. I know some districts, and I don't know if it's current, but I know there was times where some districts decided not to bother with it because it just cost too much, and they just absorbed the cost of the services themselves. Is this still beneficial to us to go through this process?
Look at Dan for that one.
Yeah, so like Marty said, we are only claiming 3 of those services. I think those are the ones that are generating the most fruit for the work, the most return on the investment. There are some districts that will claim transportation. There are some that will claim all the way down to a prorated share of the use of technology. So it can get very granular, but at the high level, I think right now we're doing okay, but it's certainly something we could take a look at.
I think it's sort of Mark references in the world pre-COVID, conversations around how much staff it took to put everything in for Medicaid versus the reimbursement we received.
Right.
And I know last we looked, there's still a win to that, you know, and Marty loves it. So just you can tell those forms and everything has to get put into the state. So, but I appreciate it. So we'll continue to look at that.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions? That was actually one of the questions I had. Anyone else? Actually, I actually have a question. At one point, I think, and this was pre-COVID too, there was so much work involved, we were behind, like by several years, if I'm not mistaken, so are we caught up now in terms of reimbursement
the state was in a quandary about how to match up students and
with the notes
maintain
or something.
confidentiality.
Yeah.
And now, basically, we are able to filter all that through Frontline.
Okay.
They push through to match up our students, and it's all done through technology. So it's gotten way, way better than it was.
Great. Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks for being here tonight and for all
You're
the work that
welcome.
you do.
Thanks, Marty.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Our next special report is Mrs. Watt for the Penfield High School course guide updates.
Hello.
Thank you for having me tonight. I believe that the course guide was sent to board members in advance in a draft format ahead of time. It's a hefty document, though. It's also available in draft form online and was shared with parents via ParentsWare because last evening we held a PTSA special presentation for parents and students 8th through 11th grade to join us to hear the same presentation about the course guide. We had roughly, I'd say, about 130 participants in that meeting, so it was very well attended to get information about the options for next year. So again, it's a large document, a lot of information. So my goal tonight is really just to share with you the priorities, both district and building wide, and focus sort of the highlights of the course guide around those elements. And so our goal really in development of the master schedule through the course guide is to increase student access both to classes as well as any career and college aspirations that students have, making sure that there's space allowed in student schedules and the master schedule to not only meet graduation requirements, but to offer experiences to students to explore some of those interests that they might have after high school, and to make sure that they're able to do both at once in meeting all of those needs. Of course, continuing to maintain applying rigor for students and offering opportunities to lift students to meeting those expectations across the board for all of our students, no matter what their individual needs are. In practice, what that looks like is really us doing a lot of review of enrollment trends over the course of time, really taking a look at student interest and soliciting the courses that they want to take, and that changes year to year. And so we try to reflect the course offerings in that same way within our master schedule as well. We are trying hard to avoid what we call singletons, which means offering only one section of the class throughout the entire day, because it does cause some constraints for student schedules where then they have to make some really difficult choices about what they want to take, what they're willing to sacrifice in order to take it. So we're really trying to create enough student interest in those courses where we avoid those situations and are able to offer multiple sections of the course. We're also supporting differentiation, of course, as we move away from honors and really providing opportunities for all of our students to meet expectations. Differentiation and enrichment becomes that much more important, particularly in 9th grade, and I'll talk more about that later in the presentation. And we've implemented really quite a few SUPA dual credit options for students to be able to take in lieu of some of those local honors courses. So again, I'm just going to highlight some of the priority pieces around rigor and sort of a broad range of options available to students. In art, as you can see, not only are there a lot of options, it really gets pretty specific for students as they start to really hone in on which particular discipline within art that they're interested in, especially if they're intending to pursue that in college. There are also upper level dual credit art classes available for students to take. Business, there are many, many more offerings besides what's listed for you here in the course guide, but I'm just sort of highlighting for you here those that are dual credit that students can take. Again, and when I say dual credit, it means it counts here and it counts in college for students as well. So lots of opportunity to gain those credits. In English, I just want to highlight that there is a new class that's being offered in 10th grade. You'll see highlighted there pre-AP 2 is a new class that's taking the place of what used to be English 10 honors. That is sort of an entry-level class for students who are looking to continue forward in taking AP courses. There's no AP exam attached to that, but again, it is an entry point for students to start getting used to, again, a really well nationally vetted course for students who want to start challenging themselves in that way. Open to any student. There's no prerequisite. Any student who has interest in that is welcome to enroll in that course. Again, several electives available for students starting in 10th grade and beyond, and that's the only thing that our seniors take, right? They select 2 electives to fulfill that last year of English credit. Health, we're one of the few districts who proudly requires both Health 1 and Health 2 as a graduation requirement for students. So instead of it just being one health course, students are required to take both. We also are proud to partner with Delphi in offering Reconnecting Youth as an option for families who may have some concerns personally, or students that we might have a high level of concern in terms of any sort of at-risk behaviors that we are noticing among students. It is an option for families, and we partner with families to provide that support in terms of substance use or abuse as a half-year course for students to earn credit while engaging in those conversations on a daily basis. There's some changes in math as well, but it sort of follows the progression that's been coming along the way in shifting away from some of the honors options for students and continuing to explore other AP opportunities. For example, much like English did, the math department this year is going to be taking a look at a brand new course coming out of College Board, the pre-calc AP class. So they're doing some diving into that to see if that is a valid opportunity for students to take next year in lieu of pre-calc honors. So just doing some more exploration in those options. You can see, especially in 11th and 12th grade, that students have a very broad range of options and math courses that they can take that meet every need from like base level math that students need all the way up through well into college math. We even have some students who exceed this, if you can believe it, and end up taking some courses at MCC to continue down that path. Music, again, has many, many options and different ensembles for students to join. I would just want to highlight here, last year we started the studio recording and sound engineering class. It was extremely popular, and that's going to be continuing on this year, and I imagine in more than one section at this point as well, so that's great news. Physical education is sort of, again, sort of standard in 9th and 10th grade, but by 11th and 12th, students have more choice. I just want to highlight for phys ed that we did start unified physical education this past school year. It's been extremely well received and successful. It's an integration of our general education students with special education students, many of whom have developmental disabilities, and really trying to integrate students, not only for the class itself, but to really start to form more connections among students. And it's many of the students who participate in our unified sports teams as well. And so developing relationships in the hallways and in different clubs and things like that, it's been a really positive outcome for all the students who are involved. Science, again, there's not a lot of change within the science offerings, but again, just highlighting for you the many options that are dual credit for students. There's a range here for students whose science is not their thing. Eventually, they have some options that are elective-based, really, and still fulfill the requirements they need, but are a little bit more interest-based, as opposed to having that really, really high level of rigor and lab requirement that students, that sometimes can bog down a student's schedule as well. Social studies of note really is that at each grade level you can see that there's an upper level opportunity here, right? There's an AP-ish kind of opportunity all along the way. The AP exam and the Regents exam doesn't happen until 10th grade here. Again, that AP in 9th grade is sort of that precursor, just entry point in. And so that's a decision families at Bay Trail will make, right? If that's an appropriate next step for students to take once they come to the high school. Technology is this ever-evolving thing, right? Always trying to keep up with the latest and greatest. And so we're really, really fortunate to still have a teacher who's qualified to run Project Lead the Way. And that is going strong here. And so they continue to kind of keep up with the latest and greatest that is happening, and really finding ways to make our students kind of ideal candidates going into those colleges that they're looking to get into. World Languages continues to offer a wide range. The one note that I'll make here is with regard to the AP classes. We solicit directly from our students who are sitting in the class currently what their preference, what they see themselves doing in the following school year. So in this regard, we talk to students who are currently sitting in our College French 1 class and try to solicit, like, where can we get the most students to enroll next year? Is it AP French? Is it College French 2? Where do students see themselves going so that we're really fulfilling the need of the bulk of the students in that class? So this school year, it ended up that many of the students in College French 1 would prefer to take College French 2. However, we are going to incorporate an option for students to sit for the AP exam should they want to. So kind of making sure that both of those options are available for students who might want to get that AP credit as well. Special education, I'll keep relatively brief because it is, of course, all dependent on the CSE process and recommendations that come through those meetings, but very, very happy to share that we are expanding our continuum, much needed expansion, and all of this fancy wording here, ICOT, that you see there is really an abbreviation for integrated co-taught classes, right? Continuing to offer support for students, the bulk of which we're adding is in 9th grade, to really support students through that transition and meeting their individualized needs through integrated classes, making general education classes more available, more accessible, and better supported for our students. Okay. And then, of course, E&L support is offered to students based on their proficiency level and in accordance with the 154 regulations. I would be remiss if I didn't highlight BOCES programming. We are so lucky to be able to have so many of our students take advantage of this opportunity. We send roughly 70-ish students from our building each year to either the introduction or advanced courses over at BOCES through MCC programming. All vocational, huge opportunity for students to leave high school with an accreditation in a particular vocational area, whether it's something they pursue long-term or not. It's an incredible asset for students to have once they leave high school. And so this just kind of outlines for you the timeline relative to how we move forward with our schedule. It's a huge year-long undertaking, as some of you know. And so we're well on our way to working through student scheduling in the upcoming months. We've included this year an elective fair for students to bring more awareness to what is available to students. So during all of our lunches, our students who are currently sitting in those classes, taking those classes, will speak to prospective students and share sort of what their experiences have been, what their interests, might entail, what they might, work through if they decide to take the class that they're interested in. So a good opportunity for student-to-student interaction. And just two last highlights about the transcript. I touched upon this last year a little bit because it was sort of I think a missing piece from our transcript. When we talk about dual credit classes, how does a college know you're taking a dual credit course when they look at your transcript? There's nothing on there that indicates that. So we were able to add to the key of our transcript, basically in this case an asterisk that allows a college who's looking at a transcript at a quick glance to see this is a dual credit class, right? There's nothing else on there that would indicate that otherwise. The other piece that we're adding this year with the addition of enrichment at our 9th grade level, we've done the same thing where we've been able to add a sort of a note to the transcript that would allow somebody who's reviewing a student transcript to know that in the 9th grade school year, a student was participating in enrichment opportunities in some of those classes. And that is it. That's a lot, though. It's a lot. So if anybody has any questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Questions, Catherine?
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here tonight.
Happy to be here.
What would bring about singleton offering? It appears it creates the potential for conflict, and so why would it be there in the first place?
It's an awesome question. The reason for that would be, let's say I decided to offer, let's just use the example of College French 1. If only, let's say 18 students signed up for that class, I only offer one section of it,
Okay.
right? If 40 kids sign up for it, I can offer 2 sections of it, so on and so forth, right? So it's totally based on student enrollment.
Okay.
So if you offer too many classes that are too similar,
Oh, I see.
it splinters,
Okay.
right? So
Right.
instead of students taking the class, they end up splintering off, and you end up with all these single classes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And then, so how do you handle it when a conflict occurs?
So first and foremost, we try to really be careful of, like, do we have redundancies?
Okay.
Let's look at what students would take, right?
I noticed that, what you had mentioned
Yeah.
that, and that's
Yep.
your avenue?
That's the first avenue. It's
Okay.
still going to happen no matter what, right? There's going to be times when students have so many interests and so many things that they're wanting to pursue. So eventually, once we decide what classes are going to run next school year, there's enough enrollment that we're going to run those classes. We start scheduling students, and then come spring, we start to go, okay, I move pieces around as much as possible. I look at conflict reports and I say, okay, if I move this from this period to this period, can I get more kids in? Can I reduce the conflicts as much as possible? So we try to
Yeah.
shrink that as much as we possibly can. And then for those few outliers that might still have a conflict that is unavoidable, we reach back out and have hard conversations
Yeah.
about choices that students have to make.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great.
And
Thank you.
prioritize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Thank you. Board members, other questions for Mrs. Watt?
It's a big, fun puzzle.
No questions? This was really great. I appreciate well, I had the opportunity to be there last
Yeah,
night too,
yeah.
as the board rep and as a parent, so I think it's really great. I think last night you said it was going to be recorded. Is
It
there
was.
somewhere that
It was
families?
sent out on Parent Square today,
Okay,
actually. Dr.
wonderful.
Snyder actually also
Okay,
sending
yeah,
that,
because there
both
was
of us,
definitely
yeah.
a lot of
Yep.
809 parents and
Yep.
a lot of questions, and so, but it was really great.
Yep, so I shared it out this afternoon via Parent Square again, along with the course guide itself, EMCC catalog, as well as our scheduling timeline, so parents can kind of keep track and stay with us.
Right. Well, and the other point I think you made, which was really great, is that it's not set in, I know you meet with
No.
students, but there's a lot of opportunity for parents to talk with students about their choices.
It
and-
feels awfully early for
Right,
folks to start
right.
thinking about and
Yeah.
making these kind of decisions for next year, and that is an excellent point. There's nothing set in stone. It's our best guess at it for right now. There's always opportunity to adjust.
It's
I think it's
awesome. Thank
just a
you.
comment is I really appreciate, because when you look at our course description guide that I've always been proud of in Penfield, is it's very long.
It
In the
is.
sense that there's a lot of options.
Yeah.
And so starting this process early is simply because it's all the APs, all the counselors, all the students all checking in, and then having to come back again and review as we get closer to the end of the year. But it is any high school,
Yeah.
especially our size, trying to schedule is a massive undertaking that I know the team takes really seriously. So kudos to your APs and your counselors as well, who are all nonstop scheduling. And would just really encourage families to please open that up in Parent Square and take a look at it, because for some students, it might just be, well, I'm just going to take whatever. But if you really dig in, there's some really cool things you can do, and some students need that push a little bit. I know our counselors do, to try something new and push a little bit. So it's really great. Thank you.
Yeah, couldn't do it without the counselors, that is for sure. And it's worth noting, we paid a lot of attention to our course descriptions this year to ensure that it was a true description of the course, not the type of learner, right? Really trying to make sure we're not sort of outlining the type of student that should take a particular class or not, and really focusing on this is what will be learned in the class, open to anybody.
That's really great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And it's so user-friendly with the little links.
Yeah,
It really, I mean, it's
good.
So
really great.
you get to stay.
I know, I'm gonna just slide over if that's okay. That's how
Bring
this
up,
works.
that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll bring up the rest of our principals, and as they're coming up, I'll turn it over to Dr. Potter, who's going to walk us through, the board's seen it before, and obviously our principals have, but just a review of the district priorities, and then our principals will speak to them.
Yes, so thank you and good evening, everyone. These priorities, our district priorities, were shared last year with the Board of Education and our community. And so as a district, we continue to prioritize and work to align the 4 principles of New York State Education Department's culturally responsive sustaining education framework. And those 4 principles are welcoming and affirming environments, high expectations and rigorous instruction, inclusive curriculum and assessment, and ongoing professional learning and support. And so this evening, I'll share our district priorities again and how we're working as a district to actualize the principles of the culturally responsive sustaining education framework. And then I'll turn it over to our building principals so that they can share the same specific to their buildings. So this is our first priority, and we're being very planful and thoughtful in our implementation of the culturally responsive sustaining education framework and the SEL, social emotional learning benchmarks as provided by the state. And like the 2021-2022 school year, we continue to facilitate our district diversity, equity, and inclusion core team and our district diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittees. Our schools will also talk about their specific DEI teams once we transition to them. And this priority of welcoming and affirming environments focuses on creating the safe spaces where all of our students and families and faculty can find themselves reflected and represented in our school community. As a district, we'll continue to foster an environment where all cultural identities are valued and affirmed and leveraged for their rich funds of knowledge from which we can all learn from. Also of importance to note, the Office of Human Resources, led by Dr. Kenny, is committed to and diligently looking for opportunities to recruit and hire and sustain a diverse educator workforce. And this really helps to characterize the many cultural groups that are represented in our student population and our district community. The second priority, as aligned with the second principle of the culturally responsive sustaining education framework, is connected to Dr. Maloney's office, and her office has begun to work district-wide to share the district's philosophy and agreed upon practices for equitable grading kindergarten through 12th grade. The Office of Curriculum and Instruction is also partnering with Monroe One BOCES to facilitate a program evaluation of the Penfield Central School District's enrichment program to determine and ensure the alignment with the culturally responsive sustaining education framework. Principle 3, which is inclusive curriculum and assessment. During this school year, also, Dr. Maloney's office, the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, is committed to the development of a curriculum review cycle, ensuring that all of our curriculum is aligned with standards, the SEL benchmarks, and the culturally responsive sustaining education framework. And then finally, our fourth priority as a district really connects to all of the partnerships that we have, the partnership with Partners in Restorative Initiatives, which is PERI, and the Children's Institute, to further our work district-wide with community building, restorative practices, and social-emotional learning. I'm proud to say that during the 2021 and 2022 school year, we trained 93 members of our district community. This included our administrators, our building faculty, our teachers, mental health team members, teaching assistants, and we also invited students and families last year to be trained in community circles. And then already this school year, our 2022-23 school year, we have trained 54 faculty members. We are also building our internal capacity and have had many members of our district actually trained. They participated in a turnkey training with PERI, and they are trained as our Tier 1 restorative practices trainers. And we have co-facilitated all of our trainings this year in partnership with PERI. And then, as previously shared, our district is currently engaging in the process for revising. We're reviewing and revising our district code of conduct to ensure consistency across each of our schools and to support and implement the work of restorative practices. And so one last thing to note, as a district, we had restorative champions last year and SEL champions, and we've merged both of those into one group, which we're calling our equity champions, to help to champion the work that we're doing. And this really does help to solidify the district's effort and bring cohesion and alignment to the culturally responsive sustaining education framework as we continue our implementation. So our equity champions, they have been working very hard to take collective actions within their schools. They are incorporating student cultural values and assets to ensure those culturally responsive environments. Our equity champions are employing the best practices of the culturally responsive sustaining education framework, our social justice standards, and the SEL benchmarks, as well as restorative practices. And they are also listening for and communicating equitable changes within their schools in the ways that we want to continue to see our school culture and district culture shift, our practices, our systems, and our structures. So with that, I am pleased to now turn it over to our building principals.
Thank you.
Can we do introductions, just name and building would be great.
Okay.
For-
So I'm Kelly McNair, principal at Cobbles Elementary School.
Marcy Ware, Principal, Indian Landing.
Scott Hirschler, principal at Scribner.
Mark Nelson, principal at Harris Hill.
Rob Snyder, principal at Bay Trail.
Leanna Watt, principal at the high school.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So we are going to talk about each of those priorities and what it looks like in our buildings, elementary school, middle school, and high school, under priority 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for priority 1, what it looks like at the building level is, first of all, we have a consistent social emotional learning block across the elementary buildings, which helps us to ensure that students have access to the social emotional learning curriculum, and that looks different at every grade level. We do have a second step curriculum, K-5, that teachers have had training on and are using during the social emotional learning block, but they are also doing things like the circles that Dr. Potter mentioned. They are doing learning games and just getting to know you games, making connections with each other on a personal level to start off their school day, which helps to set up a nice, welcoming learning environment. We also have help zones in each of our building, which is a space for students to go if they become emotionally dysregulated. That's something that we've seen since COVID, that sometimes children have a hard time maintaining in the classroom, and when that happens, they're able to have a space to go to and come back to the learning space. It's designed, it's staffed by the Center for Youth, but designed to be used for 5 to 30 minutes and get the children back into the classroom. We also have our social workers that are collaborating with our PTAs and with outside organizations to provide clothing closets and snacks across our buildings to make sure that students that don't have those have access to that. Those types of materials have access to them. And our DEI groups at each level are set up to create cultural celebrations across all of our buildings and include the members of all of the communities of our schools.
So at Bay Trail, we have a monthly DEI focus. So for the month of December, we're doing a door decorating contest around various holidays that exist in the month of December. We make it fun, so it's a contest, and then me and some of our caring community ambassadors go through and we rate the doors and give out pizza prizes to the class that has the best door. So just making the DEI work a point of celebration in the building. We have trained our teachers on using academic circles. Something we did some shifting around this year is we have monthly leadership meetings with our facilitators for all of our different departments. What we did is I started to turnkey trainings that I deliver to those facilitators, and they take it back to their departments and they deliver it to the teachers. And then the teachers are tasked with trying that instructional strategy with the students. And so the first one we did this year was academic circles to create that welcoming environment, but also keep it content related. We are doing a book club. In the spring, we're going to launch an LGBTQ+ book circle around creating a welcoming and affirming environment for those students and staff in our building. And we are planning to invite parents to also attend that. We are going to launch the Bay Trail Mosaics Club in January. We opened a catch-all closet in September that was led by our mental health team. That closet consists of various clothing items, toiletries, and school supplies, and it's available to all students in the building. And we also are having our counselors this year do 6th grade lunch bunches quarterly with every 6th grader. So they'll meet with their counselor in groups of 3 to 5 on a quarterly basis and just eat lunch. They play the first round was playing get to know you games, and the next one's going to be around their thoughts on Bay Trail and the culture of Bay Trail. And we're going to keep kind of digging in as the year goes on with the hopes of getting a lot of feedback. Those are the students that'll be there the longest because they have a 3-year period with us at this point. So we want to kind of transform the school a little bit to create that welcoming and affirming environment.
At the high school, I'll try not to repeat. A lot of the things are similar in nature to both elementary and middle school, but one of the things that we kind of heard loud and clear from students is needing more spaces to be able to access adult support, and not just the counseling center, and different spaces with different staff members and different people that they might be able to connect with differently throughout the day. And so with that came not only the introduction of the Help Zone with Center for Youth, really grateful for that partnership. And we actually outgrew that space very, very quickly and moved into a large classroom space that's now dedicated for that purpose all day long for students. Planned meetings and restorative conversations and other needs that come up in the immediate. We also have the opening of the Student Support Suite. We took a portion of our building and really redesigned that and made it a much more functional space for students. It houses both of our K-12 social workers. It also houses one of our clinicians from Strong Behavioral Health who sees students directly, and it also includes our staff member, Mr. June, from the Center for Youth. It also is where our clothing closet is maintained and accessed on a very regular basis at the high school. And so those are just some of the ways, including the relocation of our all-gender restroom to be able to really supervise and maintain that space for the purpose it was intended, with having it located much closer to supervision, me specifically, with my direct supervision throughout the day.
So I'm talking about priority 2, high expectations and rigorous instruction. And as you will hear, I think throughout all 4 of the priorities, one of the biggest changes this year at the elementary level was a consistent schedule K-5. So Mrs. McNair talked about that uninterrupted SEL block that every school has. We actually have the same schedule at all 4 elementary schools. So when we talk about SEL in the morning, Cobbles is doing SEL, Indian Landing is doing SEL, Scribner's doing SEL, Harris Hill is doing SEL. 5th graders, I'll use 5th grade as an example, have math at the same time across the district. They have lunch and recess at the same time across the district. What that's allowed for is for teachers, they have common planning time. So if we need to get teachers together, we've become really good at virtual meetings, probably too good the past several years. But we could pull people together for a Teams meeting across the district, getting that whole team of teachers together where we've never had that before. What it's also done, it assures that students are receiving equal numbers of learning minutes in academic areas, lunch, recess, and SEL in all 4 buildings. We were close before, we always had guidelines, but sometimes trying to work the nuances of a schedule. Indian Landing's recess might have been 25 minutes, Scribner's might have been 30 minutes, and And not because we were trying to be different, it just happens when you're doing it. So having that consistent schedule really ensures that there's equity for both academics and those non-academic, non-instructional blocks. We also, part of this are common assessments and our pacing guide. This is not new to Penfield. That's always been a strength of ours. But our common assessments and that pacing guide, K-5, is always looked at annually each year. It's refined. We get feedback from teachers about what's working well, what feels too fast. But what we're looking at this year, I'm trying to provide more opportunities for students with standards-based grading, rubrics, student voice and choice in how they demonstrate their learning, rather than it always being a pencil paper task or a written test. So that's ongoing, but part of what we continue to look at. Also not new, but part of that rigorous instruction and the high expectations and making sure we have consistent expectations is our district-wide RTI criteria. That again is looked at each year, but that's based off the common assessments that we have across the district. So the unit tests that a child's taking at Indian Landing are the same math unit tests that they're taking at the other 3 buildings, and we give them within the same week-long time frame. So they might not all be taking it the very same day, but within a general pacing calendar of within a week. And that criteria that we use from those common assessments, as well as our nationally normed assessments that we use, AIMS-Web and NWEA, that helps us identify students who need extra support. And we continue to have that, what I call the WIN model for intervention, the what I need. Every kid gets what they need. So students who need extra enrichment, students who need extra support, students who are at level, how are we still moving them? It's great that they're at level, but what are we doing to move them forward? So having that common criteria ensures that we're looking at the same thing across all 4 buildings, and that somebody is not getting reading support at one building just because there's space and another building doesn't have room. And then finally, I think the last piece of this is our targeted interventions that we do in our RTI or that WIN block. We really have made the shift over the past few years. I just went to a conference in Texas on the National Dyslexia Conference. We are so ahead in terms of our teaching and reading and embracing the science of reading. I really appreciate the work from the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, the things they've done to educate us as administrators with that. But that science of reading, making sure that we are doing what we need to do to teach kids how to read. And you can see that in our core instruction and in the interventions. Same thing with math. We've introduced this year Formative Loop, which is an ongoing assessment where we check some basic fluency measures with students. So we're constantly refining and trying to make sure we have information on kids and that we can be responsive in the moment and hold them accountable to those high expectations, but meet them where they are.
At Bay Trail, we have focused this work around our special education work and engaging students. So we increased the number of ICOT classes that exist in the building, and the idea behind that is that we want our special education students to not only receive the best instruction, but also get the most support, or the appropriate amount of support possible. So we have reworked the master schedule to allow those students to be in rigorous classes with their peers, but also still receive the appropriate supports. Tied into that, we have launched a series of professional learning that we're offering to our teachers through grade level department meetings focused on UDL, or the Universal Design of Learning. Essentially what you're doing is giving teachers strategies that they can use in the classroom that allow them to maintain rigorous work, but that will also allow all students in the classroom to access that work. Things as simple as providing maybe images when you're reading a long passage. That can be intimidating to some students, but if you provide images or charts that help explain that a little bit easier, they can continue to read those rigorous pieces of work, but also it's more accessible to all students. Something else that we're doing is, as a building, focusing in on 3C of the Danielson rubric, which is engaging students in learning. So that's happening through those monthly professional learnings that our department facilitators are getting. We're introducing teachers to a strategy every month. They're then turnkeying that with their students in the classroom. And the idea is to build the toolbox for teachers that they can use in the classroom to make sure the students are being appropriately challenged, but also the school is fun for students, that they're enjoying their time in the classroom. And
At the high school, I talked about some of these pieces already in the course guide presentation, so I'll kind of bypass the part about dual credit courses and our integrated co-taught continuum expanding. I'll talk a little bit about the absolving of some of our local classes because I want to explain what that means. Really, we take a look at some of the classes that might be offered to students that are perceived as maybe being at a slower pace or a different content, slowed down, different expectations for students, and we start asking ourselves, why do we have those classes? Rather than assuming that a student needs that, can't we assume that a student can actually meet the expectation that is in place for all other students? And if and when they can't we help them make it there, right? So really shifting our thinking to say, let's assume they can do it, and if they demonstrate otherwise, then we help them, right? So do we really have a need for those courses? What I'm really very proud of, and this is thanks to the support of senior cabinet and the board for approving this recently, is the implementation of our tutoring center this school year. We experienced last year in a really difficult way a student's inability to access instruction if they were suspended from school, if they had a medical need, if they needed tutoring for any reason and couldn't be in a traditional classroom setting. We really struggled to get students access to tutoring through BOCES. They were often waitlisted, only offered virtual instruction if and when it became available. So this school year alone, we're just under 30 students who've been provided tutoring support immediately, no lapse in instruction whatsoever. We also have had some Bay Trail students had the opportunity to access that as needed and appropriate. And so we're really, really happy to be able to offer that. And we're presently in the works of hopefully implementing our alternative education program as well, as we're seeing sort of the after effects still of COVID with students really struggling to have school attendance regularly, a lot of school avoidance. We have students opting to step away entirely and get their GED. And that program, along with the tutoring center, is an effort to keep our kids. Keep them with us, keep them engaged, keep them hopefully, with the goal of completing and earning a high school diploma.
Good evening. I'll be discussing Priority 3, Inclusive Curriculum and Assessment. We have front-loaded a lot of our work over the summer months and continuing our push, especially to strengthen our ELA Science and Social Studies integration block. There was a lot of DEI work in partnership with the Children's Institute that took place this summer as well to promote and identify an SEL toolkit and welcoming and affirming environments through Penfield's K through 12 SEL and whole student approaches, along with our equity champions from each school. In addition, there was the creation of new assessments in humanities and math and initiating a jump into writing pilot. For grade level release days, this is an opportunity for staff across the district to get together to be planful of future units that are going to be taking place and being taught in the district, two of which I'll identify here. One for the 4th grade called In Search of Freedom and Call for Change, and at the 5th grade level, a unit on early exploration. We're very lucky to have a phenomenal professional development coordinator and department who offers, and also through BOCES, numerous opportunities for teachers and administrators to take part to further their learning, which absolutely is going to benefit our students. There are new teacher monthly meetings that take place. Also, I'll just highlight a few examples: cultural responsive teaching, community building, restorative circles, staff book studies that are taking place. One of the courses called Making Learning Targets Work for Teachers, and also an introduction to First in Math resources. These are all ongoing throughout the course of the school year. As was mentioned by Kelly and Marcy, we do have an SEL block that is dedicated amongst all of our schools that really is about circles, community building, and it also allows students to connect with one another, which they may not get that opportunity to do so in an authentic way during the course of the school day, as well as staff and teachers being able to connect with students. One of the things in terms of Scribner we're trying to do now is have a rotation in which non-classroom instructional staff and all staff rotate into classrooms at each of the grade levels, so students are exposed to and staff are exposed to those students to help build the capacity of the number of trusted adults that students can connect with. As Marcy mentioned, we do have our second step lessons each Wednesday. And also this block, post-COVID, it also allows for unpacking of student anxieties, having these other conversations outside of the block where students are talking about something that they might bring up during that block, and the teacher wants to further that conversation or consult with mental health staff. And it also allows for unpacking those anxieties, but also helping diffuse student-to-student conflict, which allows them to be available for optimal learning throughout the day. We also are fortunate over the last 2 years to collaborate with the district and buildings through faculty meetings to promote further development of our teaching staff. A couple of the topics that we've discussed that are ongoing throughout the last few years: grading for equity, restorative practices, and microaggressions. And we also are fortunate to have superintendent conference days to engage in whole district learning that keeps us on the same page and pushes us forward.
Something that we are really proud of at Bay Trail is the work that's happening around our different curriculums and our departments. So not only are we maintaining curriculums that are up to date with New York State standards, but we're also asking critical questions about who's included in our curriculum, how does it represent all of our student body. And as we begin the master schedule process, we're asking about who takes what classes, discovering small things like it was difficult to schedule special education students to have access to honor science classes like living environment in 8th grade. So restructuring our schedule to prioritize those students having the same access throughout the day to those courses as their peers do. We're doing the professional learning around UDL, as I mentioned before. We have a book study happening, and we're looking to make that an ongoing thing. And then we are also implementing the SEL signature practices. We spend a lot of time creating a pick list for teachers to use in their classroom as like warm welcomes to start every classroom, and optimistic closures. These can be content focused, but sometimes they're social emotional focused. It really allows students, I think, a nice way to enter into different rooms. What our math teachers were just discussing in a grade level meeting recently was how since they started doing warm welcomes, they feel like kids are more open to start the class. So math can be a really intimidating course for a lot of students historically, but the teachers were sharing how since they've asked, some of them are really silly, like if you were a candy bar, what would you be and why? And other ones are more content focused, like, tell me one thing you remember from last time you were sitting in class, which is open-ended and it's accessible to everyone, rather than asking, solve this problem to start class. Since we've been doing that, we found, or at least they think anecdotally, that the students are more excited about being there and open to learning. And so those are small shifts in practice that can hopefully have long-term results that are positive for our students.
Thanks for explaining one of mine. That's perfect. So I'll focus, unlike the elementary schools, it's hard in a 9-period schedule to find time to have these community building conversations. 40 minutes goes by very, very quickly. And so to orchestrate that in a building this size takes a lot of coordination. And so this school year, we've carved out 5 separate times throughout the year to have really, again, well-planned, orchestrated community conversations with students run by teachers that align directly with the learning that administrators do, then the learning that teachers do, and then it carries on into students. Our next will be on January 4th. In addition to that, we are sort of having students now give us more input with this DEI student book club that we've just started. We've heard from students over and over again that the literature, particularly in their English classes, does not feel representative or reflective of their actual experiences. And so we've invited students and teachers from our English department, as well as our Director of Humanities, to join in reading a whole collection of books that our students selected, teachers selected, to say, what recommendations can we make forward that are more representative, are of higher interest to our students, and make them part of the required reading in our courses and bring them to the board for approval, hopefully. So that's a big change. And then lastly, really trying to create authentic learning experiences for students by putting them out in the community, right? Not just isolating those conversations and experiences here, but introducing students to others in the community who have common interests and who really can provide more authentic experiences for students.
I have priority 4, ongoing professional learning and support. We've been coming here for a bunch of years doing this format, and I've never been last. I asked to be last. I probably shouldn't have asked to be last because Scott did all my things.
I had to check the slide a couple times.
Yeah, ditto, I guess. I will just further a little bit of that and thank the direction of Dr. Potter. The work that we're doing is hard work, and the conversations are difficult, and you're giving us grace and time and patience. We appreciate that. We are being, we're learning together as we move the work forward, and we're going at a pace that we're listening to the people, the teachers, and the community. So we're thankful for that. I want to also mention Kevin Marriott and his work through the PD department. He is amazing, and he has supported all the teachers and faculty and staff through the professional development process. The book studies are important. As we learn together, we can then help our teachers and our students go forward. So the book studies, the common text, the restorative journey, and all I can tell you is that I was one that I'm wading into it, and it's opened my eyes quite a bit. And just even having faculty meetings today where we're doing small circles and we're going through very difficult conversations around microaggressions, and the teachers thanking us for the work. So I really didn't have much to say, so I just kind of went with it. So thank you for all your work.
So yes, priority 4 kind of encompasses all of the other work that we're doing because it's professional learning around those things. So like Mark, I think I've said everything that's on this slide, but I will say like tomorrow we're having a faculty meeting. Mark would have done the same one with his staff today around microaggressions, but we're empowering our staff. So we have 15 breakout rooms, all of the Bay Trail staff, and the circles are going to be led by teachers who've been trained through the PERI restorative practice circles. So it's not going to be led by administrators or teacher leaders. These are just your average teacher in the building that's stepping up, taking on leadership roles, implementing the work that we're doing in a way that's vulnerable, right? And they're having tough conversations, they're facilitating tough conversations with their colleagues. So it's been a lot of fun to see people open up and have these tough conversations in PD. One thing I would just add is that this year at Bay Trail we created a professional learning page for our teachers so that they can go and get work around this DEI work. So it's housed in Microsoft Teams, and our teachers have access to it, and we created that in collaboration with our PEA group so that it's probably about 100 resources ranging from books to videos to short readings to lessons that they can do and learn on to use some of this work in their own classroom and continue to grow as teachers. So thank you. And this is my plug. The next 3 nights, starting 3 minutes ago, is the Bay Trail Winter Concert. So if you're interested in attending, join us.
I'll just add by saying we had our faculty meeting today, same 18 small groups of teachers having the same kind of conversations around harmful language and microaggressions. And I guess, I'll close for all of us, I think, by saying that it's important for you to know that all of the priorities that we're focusing on are done with fidelity. There's accountability in it for all of us. We are held accountable in partnership. We are empowered to hold our staff accountable in that way, and all of that translates to a better experience overall for our students. So we thank you for all of that support.
Before questions, I just have to say how incredibly proud I am of our leadership team and our principals for your work, your effort, your partnership. I think that the work we are doing is challenging, but it is in the best interest of all of our students that we serve on a daily basis. So I am proud of each of you, and I thank each of you. As you noticed, all of the things that were shared this evening, there's a thread that's woven throughout each of the buildings and connected back to our district. So thank you for your work, and I look forward to all of the things that we'll continue to do together. Now questions.
Whew. It's very impressive. Board members, questions? No questions. Mark?
I'll say something. More comment. I could say something about any one of these 4 priorities. 3 of them are really about the students, which is where it all ends. But 4 is about the staff and the professional staff. And when we look at what goes on in other parts of the country where they're downgrading the criteria for educators and what it's going to do to those students, I wholeheartedly support that what we're doing here is, hiring high caliber teachers, educators, and continuing to develop their careers, develop their skills as we go, because that's the only way we can fulfill the first three priorities. So again, thank you. I like what's going on. I think we're on the right track.
He brings to mind a thought, if I may. The professional development that is going into this is obviously very important, but we understand how difficult it is. When you go through life and you're just going along, and then all of a sudden you become aware of other things other than the bubble you live in, it's really hard. And it doesn't mean it's not a good thing. It doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done. But I'm really impressed with how it's been embraced because it's for the students. And that's why, well, it's for us too. It's for our own personal development and, as we go out in the community for our own families and our friends and whatnot. But the work we do is for the students. And we know that the work you do is for the students. But when we struggle on behalf of the students, that's impressive. And so I just wanted to, build on what Mark was saying, because I think it's pretty cool.
Can I just comment that I think Mark mentioned it, and Rob and Leanna as well. I had my faculty meeting today, and it was led by teacher facilitators doing small group circles. We were all in the gym, so I was able to move around and kind of sit in and hear each circle. And a common thing that came up was, thank you so much for the district for giving us time to have these conversations. Thank you for making this a priority. We appreciate having the chance, the opportunity to talk. That was just comes up over and over again. So thank you. But it's because the teachers appreciate it. We appreciate it, but our teachers appreciate it as well.
Was that for me?
No, it's not.
I just have to say, I'm really impressed with how well behaved they are, because when you get six
I
principals
know.
in a room, it's really.
You should have seen the pre-planning.
He was just poking him, saying, don't say anything.
No, that was great.
I always have to say something. So, many of us, and myself included, have sat through these presentations done differently for many years, and it is so lovely and beautiful and refreshing to see you all come together and really to see the common thread. And the couple notes that I wrote, which is really elevating student voice and choice. And I heard it at the elementary and at the middle school and at the high school. And really what that does is create engagement and more learning. And then when we flip it to the professional development side, we're talking about the same thing, right? We're elevating staff voice and choice and collaboration. And it's just so impressive. And I just want to echo what Dr. Potter said. I'm just so impressed with this team and, the amount of work that you're putting into really doing what's best for kids. Yeah. So thank you so much.
So before you go, because
I know you're going to have to say something.
I have to thank the team of principals and for the work that you do every day, but also the work to put a presentation together and come out to present to the board and the community. And just one of those pieces I think about is, while we talked a lot about the focus being around the culturally responsive framework, is that really it hits every single kid. And so as we talked about social emotional learning and how we're sort of plugging that into our district, that's something we've done since I came here, and prior to that, the board's always been committed to the whole student, but really trying to formalize that process now. I was at a meeting and someone said, any school district that thinks that post-COVID you can pretend that you're going to go back to business as usual is naive. And so we know that students from all over come in with anxieties and stress and concern and struggles. And so we also know that when students, just like adults, want to be coming to work in school, they're more focused on it, they're willing to learn, they're willing to, as Rob talked about, maybe put themselves out there a little bit in a math class as opposed to starting with just a problem, but a get to know you type activity. And it's really the 21st century skills. We were, Jason DeLorenz, our director of technology, made us a one-to-one district in 8 months, where it usually takes 3 years because of the pandemic. And so when we talk about schedules, as Marcy mentioned, being able to pull the entire district grade level for a meeting using Teams is pretty amazing, right? So it's really also what have we learned from the pandemic and what worked and what didn't, and trying to put those in. And so I think it's really, when we talk about that equity of academics too, and I think Marcy mentioned the minutes. We talk about it's no big deal that the schedules are a little different, but over time that adds up, and we want to make sure that every student has as much time in the rigors of their academic courses, but also in the special area classes as well. So again, just a huge kudos. I really appreciate it, and thanks for all that you're doing. You made it sound easy, and we know it's not. Thanks. And you are more than welcome to stay for the remainder of the board meeting. Rob, I think, invited you to a concert, so if you want to walk out with Rob.
Yeah, we're going
that's
to the
great.
concert.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes special reports.
Special reports, all right. That was wonderful. Give them a minute to get settled here. All right, Lila, you're up. Student report.
Hi, good evening. So just to start off with a couple of updates here at PHS. So the varsity hockey team is playing Victor tonight. It started at 7 p.m. And also with the hockey team, they ran the 16th annual Skate with the Patriots Youth program. The Ambassadors Club is hosting its annual Giving Tree. So cash donations are being collected for families in need to help provide holiday cheer. The girls basketball team also hosted an early morning clinic with the younger girls basketball team. The PHS dance team performed at the boys basketball game against Victor last Friday, which was a lot of fun for everyone. The French club made holiday cards, and students represented Penfield at NISMA, the state level musical festival. The Girl Up Club cheered on women's activists during the Girls on the Run 5K over the weekend. And members of the symphony orchestra played at a local church for their breakfast with Santa. At Bay Trail, the library is running the annual Gently Used Winter Clothing for Saints Place, and this drive is running through December 22nd. At Indian Landing, they have their own winter concert next Wednesday. At Scribner is looking forward to hosting its annual holiday assembly coming up with fun songs and holiday games. At Cobbles, 5th graders are practicing their viola skills and music lessons. And at Harris Hill, for Thanksgiving, students made thankful turkey placemats with Best Buddies. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Lila? No. I have a question. The Girl Up Club, is that new? Because okay.
Yes, so it is new this year. So it's part of it's a branch of the Model or United Nations. So yes, it's new this year, and they're currently also selling stickers during lunches to help benefit the women in Iran. Sure.
Yeah, I saw something on the announcements.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing. Alrighty. Are we going to super reports?
I hope so.
Okay. Well, because is mine wrong?
That's kind of the next thing on the slides,
All right.
Is it?
isn't it?
Yeah.
a motion first on the
Oh, you do. Yep,
Am
you
I
have an
supposed to do
emotion.
that first?
Oh. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, because we don't normally do that. That's why I was confused. It's not out of order?
So,
Am I supposed to do this,
Yes.
or are we waiting?
I would follow
Okay,
the
I'm
order
going to
of the
go with it
agenda.
then. Sorry, I
Yeah.
was a little thrown by that. All right, so item 4.
Yeah.
May I have a motion, please, and a second, that a board approves the agreement between the Association of Penfield Teaching Assistants and the Penfield Central School District effective July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Sorry about that. I got a
No.
little, I was like, wait a minute.
No, you were right. You were 100% right.
All right,
Yep.
done.
All right.
All right, you're up. Super reports.
Great.
It's still the next thing on the slides.
I know. Well, and then it's not, then I was like, we don't normally do it there, right?
So I
was
just have
confused. All
a
right.
few student and staff honors. During COVID, I did Penfield Central School District updates because we're getting lots of questions. We've got 2 sets of questions that have been coming in, so I'm going to address those a little bit. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Driffel for our annual reserve fund plan and budget updates. Before I go on to student and staff honors, one that's not on here, I don't believe, is hot off the press, which is the board has a letter from our robotics team. I believe district admin does too, but just an invite to the first robotics team, 1511 Rolling Thunder, would like to invite you to the first Tech Challenge qualifier at Penfield High School, Saturday, December 17th from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. And that event, I know many of you have been there over the years. The qualifier allows for our middle school robotics students to compete against other teams from the area with this year's robot, which they started building near the beginning of the school year. And so, as we know, our robotics club, students learn all about different types of energy sources as well as energy storage and distribution, and develop STEAM skills and understanding of the importance of teamwork. Students are able to achieve the goals given to them throughout this year. So I didn't open this until I was on my way over and said, let me mention that as well. So great family event for all to come out. Thanksgiving Drive, Penfield Winter athletes and the entire school community supported the Penfield's Promise Thanksgiving Drive for residents of EL Tower. And through this program, the district was able to provide Thanksgiving meals and pantry supplies for all 210 residents at EL Tower to support their Thanksgivings. Rock to Change Summit. 8 Penfield High School students participated in the recent Rock to Change Student Summit on Race, which has been going on for many years now. Happens twice a year across our county. Penfield was the second to host. West Irondequoit was the first original Rock to Change Summit, and Penfield years ago was second to host. Students from across the county schools and, of course, Rochester City School District. So congratulations to our students who were there for representing PHS and the Penfield Central School District so well. Our Golden Apple Award, congratulations to Bay Trail 6th grade teacher Rachel Wyman on receiving a Golden Apple Award from Channel 8 for being a great teacher. She was nominated by student Dominic Fantagrossi for being an engaging teacher and for making all students feel safe and supported in her classroom. I would second that as superintendent, and just kudos to Rachel for all the great work she does for students. We always announce our Scholar Athlete team, so congratulations to all of our fall sports teams, all of them, for being named a Scholar Athlete team. And in order to qualify for this honor, the team's average for 75% of the roster must be 90% or higher. And it really is so many of our fall teams: cheerleading, boys and girls cross country, field hockey, football, girls golf, gymnastics, boys and girls soccer, girls swimming and diving, girls tennis, and boys and girls volleyball. So again, that student athlete being student is critical. So I have a couple of updates. We've gotten some questions in the community around extracurricular athletics as well as new developments in Penfield, and I just have a couple slides on each. Really, one is I just want to talk about the extracurricular piece and acknowledge the fact that, you know, as a board and as a district, we really do understand that it can be frustrating when the district can't provide detailed information regarding individual employee or the specific reasons why they weren't asked to return for coaching or even teaching and administration. However, just as an acknowledgement to the community is how much work and consideration goes into those decisions. We don't take any of them lightly. And so we received some general questions that I wanted to touch upon because I think they're important. And really around the hiring process, this is actually relatively new in the last 8 years, because coaching positions used to just be much more word of mouth and all out of the athletic office. And so honestly, when I stepped into this role, that always was interesting to me, that it wouldn't be like any other position. So about 7 years ago, I've been here 8-ish, so about 7 years ago, we shifted, and all of our coaching positions are posted just like any other opening on our district's employment page and underneath job opportunities. And then additionally, because many of our coaches, not all, come from our teaching staff or our faculty and staff, coaching positions are shared via district email to all staff. And then, just like with all district hiring, candidates have to fill out an application. They can, once they do that, we review. They may be invited to interview. In-depth reference checks are done for all finalists before a final person is chosen to coach, and that's for all of our sports. And coaches are appointed each season. So it's different than a teacher who could receive tenure or it's an annual, really a probationary period. Coaches are appointed per season. And so we also review all of our coaches every year. Again, this has become stronger over the years. And so coaches are reviewed, and the district considers overall performance and compliance with district policies as well as our code of conduct. We consider commitment to work with and support other coaches, both within their sport and others, and consider the commitment to provide a fair and supportive and equitable environment for all students. And so just a bit of an update, because I did receive questions on our hiring process and review process for all coaches. I did also receive a number of questions. If you drive by the area around 250 in Atlantic, you will see what looks like something out of, I don't know, a Transformers movie. There's like 15 huge machines ready to get to work. And so I have received a number of questions from residents wondering what's going there. And so just, although the school district and the town are separate entities, and we always talk about that, I do meet with our town supervisor, Marie Cinti, the Penfield town supervisor, on a regular basis, and am kept up to speed. And one of the things I wanted to share with our district members, who many of them are also Town of Penfield, but we have more towns than just Penfield that come to Penfield schools, that the Town of Penfield approves all new builds. So it's not something that the district has a hand in at all. All relevant information, though, can be found on the Town of Penfield page, penfield.org. If you click your government tab on the top and then property under review, you can see all of the property under review, the property applications that have been denied, those that have been approved. And so I want to talk a little bit, because there are 3 large-scale projects all around that 250 and Atlantic Avenue intersection. And the pieces where the question comes from is, how is that going to impact enrollment? Because our district had lots of conversations when Shadow Pines was maybe going to become homes. And so these are 3 major pieces of property with lots of acreage. And so I'll share with you that while all 3 that are here are in Penfield, they all fall in the Webster Central School District, which sometimes amazing people when I also mention like the Penfield YMCA is in the Webster Central School District. So it gives you a little idea of the lines of our school districts are not nice, neat rectangles. And so the ones that are, one that's approved is Penfield Heights. It's all 3 of these are mixed use, which is what the town has really been digging into. So it's residential, but also commercial together. And so Penfield Heights is 1820 Fairport 9 Mile Road. That is apartments and townhouses. It looks like, I think last I knew, is somewhere around 150 units. The arbors at Penfield is where you might see all of the yellow construction vehicles waiting to go. That's tabled right now. It's not approved, but my understanding is it will be approved. And then that is right at the corner of 250 and Atlantic, and that is around 700 units of townhouses, apartments, and some single-family homes. And then Pastone Development is 1801 Fairport 9 Mile Road. That's still under review, and that's another about 100, but it can change as they go through the process in terms of how many units are in there. But they're all pretty large, but in terms of us as a school district, it doesn't impact our enrollment. There's always new communities coming in. There's another development on Jackson that's coming in around the Jackson and Plank area. Those are all single family homes. But these 3 I just received a lot of questions for, so I want to share with the board and with the community that although there will be a lot of construction, it is all Webster Central School District enrollment. And think about that, because I think Dan's going to talk a little bit about enrollment later today. Yeah, look at that. All right. And then I think that's my last slide. Questions?
Board members, questions for Tom tonight?
Yeah.
Yes.
The Rock to Change?
Yes.
When we hosted it, was that at Shadow Pines?
It was.
Okay.
Shadow Lake.
Shadow Lake, right.
Yep.
Because I was there.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, the excitement and the energy and the cohesiveness of these students come together. It was absolutely wonderful to see. So I just, I'm assuming because of what we saw in the picture that it was, lively like that. Again, I'm hoping it was, but boy,
100%.
Was it really impressive when I was there.
And it's really gotten much larger, so like Shadow Lake can't can't hold the
Oh.
number of students that are coming to the event now. But it really is representatives from every high school in Monroe County and the Monroe County School. So there's like also Kendall and Holly and Rochester City School, high
Right.
schools. And so it's really gotten so big that now high schools that are planning it actually are partnering most times with a Rochester City School, high school, to bring some partnership there in terms of planning. It's all student planned, adult helped, but really student planned. And then the purpose is to then hear, to listen, to learn, and then bring some of that back to your home district to continue conversations.
Right, and that's great.
Yeah.
Glad to see.
Other questions? No? All right.
All right, I will turn it over to Dr. Driffel.
Thanks, Dr. Putnam. Couple things, business updates from my office this evening for the board. First of which is a approval for surveying service associated with the capital project. So this will be surveying work for phase 2, which is largely the high school work that'll be happening. Our construction manager put out proposals for this. The results of those proposals are in your packet this evening. Because the cost is over $20,000, that's why we seek board approval for that. Every December, we review the tax levy collection report. So the board is furnished with the information around how the tax collection process went in September and October. This year, we collected 96.5% of the tax levy. That is pretty average historically where we've been. Last year was a little bit higher, but certainly no lower than where we've been in the past. So the way the process works now is we certify the amounts that were uncollected. We turn that over to the county because state education law ensures that school districts are made whole on their tax levy. The county then re-levies those who didn't pay the tax bill when they do their levy in the spring. So this is a mandated function. Tonight, we're going to review and approve the annual reserve plan. That is a new 4 years ago, state requirement that every school has to have and have board approved. And then we're going to review the draft 23-24 budget goals, guidelines, and factors. And I'll go as expediently as possible. So here's the high-level overview of the annual reserve fund plan document, which is in your board packet this evening. That document in and of itself goes through all of these reserves in detail. It talks about the interest earned on the reserves, the purpose of the reserves, what the plans are for the reserves, what the 5-year history of each reserve is. What this shows here is the last 5 years of overall reserve fund balances. So we ended the year ending June 30th, 2022 for the 21-22 school year at $27 million. That's a decline from where we were in the prior year at $43 million because we utilized that $20 million for the capital project. So if you take off the $20 million from the 43, we were able to put in $4 million last year with favorable operational surplus that we had. So $27 million, it looks drastically lower than where we were, but for a district of our size, it's still a healthy financial position to be for fund balance. And then those $27 million are added up on the right side in that chart. I'll just go through the purpose of each reserve real quickly for the community. And again, the full document is available on the board docs under this meeting. Workers' compensation is to help offset any premiums, workers' compensation that we have to pay on an annual basis for all of our employees. Unemployment insurance covers any cost to the State Department of Labor for the cost of unemployment insurance. The ERS retirement contribution is for employees in the employees retirement system, so those are all of our staff. Whereas the TRS retirement contribution is all of the instructional faculty, teachers, instructional personnel. That one's a new reserve. We speak in the document about how that is funded annually, how much we can put in, and totally over 5 years. So we're at year 3 in the 5-year funding cycle, and then that reserve will be full. The liability reserve is for any uncovered, uninsured losses that the district may receive in its operations. We're allowed to fund that to about 3% of our annual operating budget, so that's about where that sits now. The tax certiorari reserve allows us to insulate ourselves against certiorari claims from commercial properties that are challenging their tax assessments. It's our goal to have somewhere between 50% and 100% of the outstanding liability against us in the reserve. Right now, that figure at 1.6 represents about 50% of the outstanding claims. Because of the reassessment process this year, the number of tertiary claims went up. So the outstanding liabilities currently sit around $3 million. The Employee Benefits and Accrued Liability Reserve, we call that EBLR, allows us to offset against any employee separation benefits that are contained in labor collective bargaining agreements. So that's just $300,000, our smallest reserve. And then we have our two capital reserves. We have the 2021 capital reserve for buildings, which sits at $6.4 million, and our 2017 capital reserve for bus purchases. I'll talk about bus purchases in a little bit, but that reserve is currently full. So we can't put any more money in that as it currently stands. So just touching a little bit on the budget goals, and again, the document goes into greater detail, but decisions will be made in alignment to Board of Education goals. So academic achievement, partnerships, and fiscal responsibility are those three primary stated board goals. It goes without saying, but legal compliance, so we'll adhere to all federal, state, local policy procedures and local contracts as well in our budget development ethos. We have equitable considerations built in wherever possible and wherever it makes sense. And then, as Dr. Putnam mentioned a little bit earlier, in the last couple of years, we've really ramped up our technological capacity, both in devices, but on the back end and in infrastructure as well. So we want to maintain that investment. So keeping our device replacement plan flowing, ensuring that we have adequate controls against the threat of ransomware that a lot of school districts are dealing with. We added a position in the technology department this year. So it's one of the things that we're really keeping an eye on so that we don't lapse in that domain. Regarding guidelines, and this was discussed a little bit earlier with Mrs. Watt, everything starts with enrollment, obviously. So we have an initial enrollment projection that I'll touch on in a moment, but one of the things we're always looking at is class size. It's easier kind of in the common branch, grades K through 5, 6. But once you have kids moving around in middle school and high school and you have different electives, it gets to be a little bit more of, I don't know if it's chess per se, but it's certainly a lot of checkers, trying to move people around throughout the spring. And then everything from those enrollment projections falls to associated staffing needs. So it's not just the teacher, but it's all the extra supports that individual kids need as we build the budget throughout the entire spring. Professional learning remains a priority, both in the investment that we make in our staff to attend professional learning, but also that they have time in their day for planning. Material budgets last year, so for this current year, we changed our methodology. Traditionally, it was just a historical percentage increase for materials and supplies for students. We changed that to a per pupil basis. So it's based more on a unique, tailored representation of that particular school building, how many kids there are. And I think that's worked out well enough so far. We always try to prioritize state aid opportunities wherever available. So that means leveraging state grant money for technology, for library, for textbooks, and for software. And then additionally, utilizing our local BOCES wherever possible to get BOCES aid on that. And then any opportunities with our transportation department to secure transportation aid, that's something we always try to receive. We strive for efficient and effective operations when it comes to our buildings and grounds and transportation operations. So it means being proactive in our buildings and grounds. It means trying to blend the appropriate amount of service and efficiency with regards to transportation. Transportation continues to be a challenge with regard to a lack of bus drivers. So we are really running lean. We're doing absolutely everything we can. We have some midday runs going. We're doing well, but it's still tight for sure. And we'll have later in the spring our director of transportation come and our director of facilities come and speak a little bit more to their departments and their budgets. So more to come on that. All extra requests, so new initiatives, are evaluated by senior cabinet and the superintendent. And then one of the things I really prioritize and I instill in others is that we're always trying to take a long-term view. I know that we build budgets on an annual basis, but we're really looking at making programs sustainable. We're looking at 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It gets a little bit muddled when you start looking at 5 years out with all the different variables that can happen, but certainly not living within a 1 year at a time kind of time frame. So as Dr. Putnam mentioned, the first thing that we look at is enrollment. So I sent the board an enrollment report that contains much more information than just this top line number. But you can see in the current school year, as of the beginning of October, that's when we officially measure enrollment. We're at 4,630 kids. It's the most we've had in at least a decade. Really bounced back from those two COVID years, 2021 and 21-22. It's more than we were projecting. Uniquely, our kindergarten enrollment, which is the most difficult number typically to project, was spot on. We were projecting 335 and we have 331, like fantastically close. What was a unique trend for us is we had many more first graders and second graders, which probably elected for other academic opportunities in the last 2 years, join us. So that was difficult to factor for. Next year, we're projecting very similar enrollment to where we are now. We have a 5-year projection. It's in the enrollment report, but somewhere in that 46-20 range as well. So very stable year over year. One of the things that I just want to point out is that this continues to be, this upward trend is atypical for the region. You have a lot of upstate New York districts losing enrollment. Not just on the outer, ex-urban areas, but suburban Monroe County districts as well. So it's a positive force. We're having more kids come in. It's wonderful, but it also does complicate other things as well. One of the biggest line item budgets that we have is our health insurance, medical insurance for staff. So some good news. Good news is that health insurance rates for 2023 are increasing at 6.8%. That's still a lot of money. That still equates to probably $1 million in costs for the district, and new costs. But relative to trend that we're seeing locally and nationally on healthcare, that's actually below trend. We're typically seeing 8, 10, 12%. So the 6.8% number reflects that the consortium that we participate in is performing very well. 23 dental rates are decreasing very slightly, but it's like under $1 a month, so they're essentially flat year over year. Medicare rates. So Medicare is insurance that is offered contractually to some of our retirees that are over the age of 65. We're seeing substantial decreases in premiums for the next 3 years, really. So for next year, we're looking at a 20% decrease, and then anticipated decreases in those 2 out years. What is happening is there are 2 new providers, Medicare providers, that are entering the region. And our current provider, Excelis, responded to those new market entrants and substantially decreased premiums to keep their book of business with the local school districts. So that's positive news. A thing that we'll talk about much more is a looming concern, not just here but nationally, is that healthcare, because insurers negotiate with hospital networks and different doctor providers on what costs are going to be, those are delayed. And we all know that healthcare systems have seen increased costs like everybody else, trying to attract nursing staff and skilled professionals. So the concern is that when the health insurers go to renegotiate with these providers and hospital networks, that those costs could substantially increase. So certainly something we'll keep an eye on for 24. But good news in the interim. Another major expense that we incur as a school district are the pension system contribution rates. So for every employee, we pay the 2 state pension systems a certain percentage of their salaries. The ERS, as I mentioned before, which is all our staff that are non-instructional staff, all of our support staff, they participate in that ERS system. The contribution rate for next year will be increasing to 13.1%. This year it was 11.6%. So it sounds like, it's just a 1.5% increase, but actually relative year over year, it's 12%. So that becomes a new money increase of 6 figures, a couple $100,000. So that's a substantial increase. And that makes sense given some of this year's the market conditions. That stock market has calmed down a little bit. Whereas with the TRS system, they're actually going to be decreasing their rates a little bit. So in this current year, they're 10.29% of the employee's salary, and next year it'll be in a range of 9.5 to 10%. That's the range they give us at this point. They typically finalize that either in late January or early February. But the fact that it's not increasing is welcome news. I mentioned before in the reserve that we have workers' compensation rates. We participate in a consortium for that. Like the healthcare consortium, the workers' compensation consortium has done well in the last couple of years. You can see that just 5-6 years ago, the consortium was underwater in fund balance. And you can see now that we're at an all-time high fund balance of $9.5 million. So we don't have premium information yet for next school year, but I don't anticipate much of an increase, if any, based on that. So I want to talk a little bit about bus replacement. So this doesn't affect our budget per se, but it affects the budget process because we seek voter approval in May to purchase buses out of our reserve. So at this point, we are planning to reserve bus replacement in the May vote. If you recall, we did not buy buses last year in May based on the 2 prior years having just lower mileage and lower uses on the buses. We were able to get another year out of our cycle. The prices of buses has gone up substantially. So a typical diesel bus 2 years ago was $125,000. That price has gone up to $160,000. The price of a mini bus was in the range of $60,000. That's gone up to $85,000, $90,000. The price of electric buses has gone from $350,000 to closer to $400,000, just in a matter of 6 or 7 months. So our current reserve has somewhere in that $4.5 million range. It's certainly adequate for now, but we're going to need to think about creating a new bus purchase reserve, if not this year, then next year, to start to save to offset against some of these future costs, particularly as 2027 looms and the state mandate to convert our fleet to all electric vehicles starts to go into effect. The availability of certain buses has also become a real problem, particularly the minibuses. The manufacturers of the chassis of those vehicles they're not making enough, or they're not selling enough to the school bus companies. They're selling them to RVs or campers or something like that. So some of the bus providers are actually just getting out of the minibus business. So it's a challenge to procure those right now. I do want to just touch on the New York State grant that we received from our Assembly member Lunsford last year for $250,000. With those grant funds, we are planning to purchase at least 2 electric buses with the May vote. With that grant funding, coupled with the New York State Transportation Aid, there won't be a single dollar of Penfield dollars that will go towards those 2 buses. They'll be completely funded by the state. The other thing I want the board to be aware of and this might become an advocacy issue in the spring, is that the way the legislation is written right now for electric buses, whereas diesel buses are paid back 8 over 5 years, electric buses are scheduled to be paid back 8 over 12 years. And the warranty on the electric buses is only 8 years. So they're paying you 12 years of aid for a bus that may only last 8 years. It makes the economics a little bit more challenging. So, obviously many more conversations to come on that, but I think that could bubble up to be a NISCUS or NISBA issue. Maybe correct that. Regarding operations and maintenance, electric and natural gas cost projections are up significantly relative to where we were last year and this year. They've come down a little bit, but natural gas prices are still double what they were 18 months ago. Gasoline and diesel, again, also higher than recent budgets, have come down a little bit, but still double where we were last year. And like buses, it's becoming very challenging still to acquire service vehicles. So some of our large trucks, trying to even engage dealers to get those, they're telling you maybe a year at best to get them. So our fleet replacement has been strained, for sure. And Mr. English will talk about that when he comes to speak to the board later in the spring. And then just quickly, out of Albany, obviously, continued foundation phase-in is anticipated at this point. So the power brokers in Albany haven't, turned over. It looks like they'll continue with the 3rd year of the 3-year phase-in of the foundation aid, which is positive. The Office of the State Comptroller, that's at OSC mid-year report, did indicate that education funding would return to a more historically normal level in 24-25. We don't know what that means, but it's certainly not going to be as flush as it's been in the last 2 years. It could go back to 2% or 3% or 4% or whatever metric they determine. But it certainly seems like this is going to be the last budget development cycle where state aid is larger than what we've received in the past. So we'll keep an eye out for Governor Hochul's executive budget, which is scheduled to be released in the middle of next month. That'll take any questions or comments.
Board members, questions for Dan?
Yeah.
Catherine?
I do. I hope I'm not, complicating things. Now, your workers' comp rates, that's the
consortium, that's the consortium total, is that right?
Those fund balance figures?
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. And then when you mentioned in that other slide, the workers' compensation insurance of $665,000, is that our contribution to it? Or I don't understand that number.
Yep, so in the reserve plan document, it says our intended level for the reserve fund for workers' compensation is about 1 year's of premiums to the consortium.
Okay.
And that last year was about $500,000. So that $600,000 is pretty close to where we are. So that is our premiums this year, I think we're about $500,000, but we do have 1 year set aside in reserve.
Sir.
Yep,
Okay.
to fund against that, potentially if we need it as a supplemental revenue source.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
I just have a quick question. Dan, I think you answered it, but my question was, how long do we get typically out of a bus? I'm assuming it's 8 years if it's electric, if that's how long it has a warranty for.
Yep, so we don't have any electric buses, so we don't know exactly how long they're going to last. Typically, our bus replacement schedule, we keep them for 10 years. The warranty is 5 years, typically, for a diesel bus. What we and anyone in school transportation will tell you is that the engines last. They last longer than 10 years. What we run into is really body degradation with the salt, and then it gets very cost intensive to try to do all the welding and repairs, so we typically get about 10 years out of a bus.
Okay, thank you.
Also regarding buses, did you say that electric buses were $350?
They were $350, and it looks like they've moved up to closer to $400,000 each.
Okay, and then you said that we would get a grant for $250 that should buy us 2 buses.
Correct. Yeah, we'll talk about that more later in the spring, but what it does is the $250,000 will offset the local expense. So our New York State transportation aid ratio is about 70%, so we get back 70% of every dollar that we spend. So, if we spent $800,000 on 2 buses, we're going to get back, $500,000, $600,000 in aid, and then apply $200,000 from the grant to the rest of the local cost.
Oh.
We'll talk about it more come, I think, February. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction to the process.
Board members, other questions? While we're on buses, I have a bus question. At one point, I thought we were considering other alternatives to the mini bus, like large vans or something that might be an option if there's, right?
Yeah.
That are maybe less expensive or more widely available. Is that something that we're thinking about, or not really at this point?
It is something we're thinking about. We've looked at, there's the option of like a yellow bus, Tahoe or Suburban or something like that. It's certainly an option. The issue for us right now isn't the capacity of the fleet, it's the capacity of the drivers, right? So it actually is more advantageous for us to put more kids on a bus.
Okay.
So having those, a 5-seat bus is wonderful, and then you can really do one-off out-of-district runs. But if we don't have anybody to do it, it's kind of a moot point.
Right, right.
But it is something we're looking at. It's not, it is possible we'll buy one maybe this year, but we still have to flesh that out further.
Yeah, to see if it makes sense.
Just
Got
to
it.
clarify, Dr. If I think we've talked about, is that even if it's a suburban bus, which you see around like a suburban SUV with the school bus sign on top of it, which we don't have, my understanding is it's per school law still has to be a bus driver driving that bus. You still need the same license to drive the bus.
Correct, yep.
So it's
School bus passenger endorsement, yeah.
So it doesn't help us in the training piece either, right, right.
So in terms of getting those, we can, but then you can only put a smaller number of students than you can on a minibus, but it still has to be a bus driver driving that bus.
Right, right.
So,
right, might not be an option.
but we're looking at everything.
Right,
Yep.
yeah. And I had one other question. When we talk about the ERS and TRS rates, the 13.1% contribution, I just want to clarify from my memory from last year. The contribution is percentage of employees that we currently have, or is it employees that are already retired? Like, what's the percentage of?
So the employer contribution rate, that ECR, is the percentage of active employees' salary
That we're
we
paying
pay towards
into,
the
okay.
system. Yeah.
Got it. All right, that's what I thought, but I wanted to clarify.
You got it.
Because every year we talk about this and I have to go, what does that mean? So,
Well, the good news is, this meeting always is the get ready for the budget cycle meeting.
Right.
So we will, as we come back to the new year, be talking about, getting into the gear of talking about each part of the budget every meeting. So lots of times, if more questions come up, to continue asking. And Dr. Durfel loves it. He tells me after every board meeting, he absolutely loves it. You talk about budget, he loves it. You can tell, he's excited.
wait, I might have more
Thanks, Dan.
questions for you
I
than
was
that.
going to say, you deliberately withhold information so we can keep asking questions, right?
There's a lot of information, right? The board is charged with creating the budget on an annual basis.
huge.
It's why we do vote 6 months to it, so
Right,
we can
right.
really walk through everything. So, more to come.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. I think
Thanks,
we're
Dan.
good.
That
Thank-
concludes
no more-
superintendent reports.
No more questions for Dan. All right, thank you. All righty, so we're going to move on to public comment period. Instructions to participate in the public comment period are listed in the agenda and available for you online. The board will not be responding to comments during this session. Any concerns raised will be referred to district administration for follow-up when appropriate. Speakers are expected to identify themselves with their name and address and limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. Please do not name a specific student or staff in public session, and be respectful of others in your words, conduct, and demeanor, and adhere to the code of conduct. We have 3 speakers this evening. Our first speaker is Mr. Leonardo.
Good evening. My name is Carmen Leonardo. I'm here tonight on behalf of Penfield United for Education Excellence. My address is 1915 Penfield Road. I would like to draw your attention to research conducted by Roland Fryer, an economist at Harvard University, who is also affiliated with the Harvard School of Education. Professor Fryer wrote an op-ed piece in a recent Wall Street Journal entitled "Disparity Doesn't Necessarily Imply Racism." The piece was based on an examination of black-white disparities in the workplace in the 1990s and re-examined other socioeconomic areas in subsequent years by Professor Fryer and other scholars. Verbatim from the article, an honest review of the evidence suggests that current racial inequities are more the result of differences in skill than differences in treatment of those with the same skill. Admittedly, we shouldn't stop routing out racism in our society because even a smidgen is unacceptable. But we wonder if the district's premise and hell-bent focus on racial inequities as being ubiquitous is overdone when cast in light of making sure Penfield students have the necessary skills to excel when they graduate. We are certain that your insidious focus on DEI and transformative SEL, taking away precious instruction time for these disruptive and untested fads, is a colossal mistake. Here is what you should be focused on. Fact is, some of the marginalized populations represented by students in Penfield lack the basic skills they will need to excel on graduation. During the past 5 years, so this isn't a result of COVID, students who identify as Black or African American and those who identify as Hispanic or Latino and the economically disadvantaged student are grossly unprepared to read, write, and understand mathematics. Ranging from 25% to a high of almost 60% of students in the 3rd to 8th grade cohort among these categories are not proficient in English language arts and math. Up to 60% of these students are not performing at grade level. This is alarming. So rather than taking away instruction time to mold our children to be agents of your social change, Teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic, and a critical review of American history and contemporary society. That is your role and nothing else. As Professor Fryer concludes, skills matter most, and this is where Penfield schools are failing. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Ms. Bradley.
Sue Bradley, 26 Bunker Hill Drive. My topic is continued athletic department concerns, part 2. I always start with a quick review of the role of the school board: to set and steward the goals and direction of the district through policy and active open discussions with the superintendent, to nurture school, community, and government relationships, support collaborative partnerships that foster learning, communication, understanding, and a positive culture in our schools and in our community. These are your words. The process by which a recent employment decision is being handled, both within the school and the community, does not demonstrate your ability to nurture, support, communicate, or produce a positive school climate. The lack of honest and transparent communication to students, parents, and community does not show respect for the very people that you serve and fails to meet your own established responsibility. On rare occasions, there is an employee, a true coach, who is more than just an all-time national winning high school coach for his sport. One who exemplifies the qualities and behaviors that this administration lacks. An educator, role model, supporter, and advocate. One who is positively impactful on student athletes. I ask again for your transparency and accountability in going forward. Also, public comments made during these meetings should be included in the minutes. Members of the community who read them are owed a full and accurate description of the speaker's topic. There is a large contingent of people, some present here tonight, and many more across the county, the state, the country, and outside of this country that await your response. To the taxpayers and the voters, as a long-time Penfield taxpayer, my mindset was always a vote yes on the budget. I always assumed the administration was doing its job, and I supported a yes vote because I thought it was supporting the students. I urge voters, taxpayers, to reconsider that mindset. Get educated on the board's agenda, actions, and financial spending. Ask questions, demand answers. Pay attention to board member election terms and schedule and vote accordingly. Let's hold the district accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker this evening is Mr. Snell.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Sanal. I live at 20 Chatworth Circle. My family and I have been Penfield residents for 23 years, as hard as that is to believe, and we've had 4 kids that have gone through the district. My concerns tonight are about the direction of the athletic department. Over the past month, I've become aware of several incidents that are really concerning to me, but tonight I want to focus on just one, which is the handling of coaching-related matters, so I appreciate teeing up the slides with the hiring and review process. I actually raised these concerns in an email sent to the AD, superintendent, principal, school board members on November 15th. Unfortunately, I didn't get a single acknowledgement of that email. First, let me be clear, I understand coaching decisions are at the discretion of the department, and I appreciate the slides that showed the hiring and review process. But when an abrupt change is made to someone as highly decorated, someone as highly respected as one of the coaches that gave 47 years to this community, it certainly raises some eyebrows. And I would submit that the rubric used for review is either broken or not being followed. And when the school can't answer questions about it, other than we've decided to go in a different direction, we're left to figure it out ourselves. Reportedly, school athletic leaders made comments about age, about salary. I certainly hope those weren't factors in the decisions that were made. Again, the only comment is we're moving in a different direction, so we're left to wonder, what is that direction? Is there a plan? Even in tonight's consent agenda, there were additional coaches added and approved. We're about a third of the way through this winter season. Why are we still scrambling and adding coaches? It seems to me there's not really a very good plan in place. But not even as much as the why coaches are changed out, it's really the how. And I look through the lens of one of the things, the core commitments of the district, which is we treat each other with honesty, dignity, and respect. If we follow that philosophy, a reasonable person might decide to have a more thoughtful transition for a coach that has been here 4.5 decades, maybe hiring an assistant to learn what made them such a fantastic leader, maybe even plan an appropriate ceremony and recognition, perhaps on the track that's actually named in their honor already. But that's not what happened. 5 days before sectionals, this coach with 47 years of service was let go. That's about as far from dignity and respect as you can get. So it's not surprising students were upset, and that's really the thing that bothers me the most. Students started a campaign, students started an online petition, students participated in roundtables, but their takeaway is that the school doesn't really care, it's just words. We were told basically we just have to move on, and that's just a travesty. So where do we go from here? At this point, I'm appealing to the board. I think it's not too late to try to fix this. I think, as the previous speaker said, this is kind of growing. There are thousands of people who are involved, but it's not too late. So I would appeal to the board to step in, take responsibility, admit that a mistake was made, and then we can move on to begin healing. And I think it would show our students
That's our time.
that even when mistakes are made,
Thank you.
people can have leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, we're on item 7, facilities. And this is regards to the 2021 Transportation Facilities Capital Project requiring professional services for surveying. May I please have a motion and a second that the contract for surveying services as described in your packet be awarded to McMahon LaRue Associates, PLC, at a total cost of $49,750.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments on that? All those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you. And then we're on to financial item 8, which is our property tax collection status that Dr. Driffel reviewed earlier. May I have a motion, please, in a second, that the board approve the 2022-23 property tax collection status, including all additions and cancellations made to the original approved levy amount.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments on that? All those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you. And our second item is the approval of the reserve funding that we had in our packet and that Dan reviewed this evening. May I please have a motion and a second that the board hereby approve the annual reserve plan and the presented recommendations and directs that the recommendations for reserve use be incorporated into 23-24 budget planning processes.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments on that? All those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you. We need, item 9 is to approve the compliance plan, certification, and approval as presented during our special reports. May I please have a motion and a second that the board recertify the Medicaid compliance plan as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments on that? All those in favor? All in favor, none approved. Thank you. All right, so we have our textbook approval that was presented at our last meeting. Have we had any comments?
We have.
Ooh.
We just got one comment from a community member that wrote, for all 3 books, thank you for these choices, representation matters, culture matters, culture responsive teaching is something I'm very grateful my girls experience in the Penfield Central School District. Please keep up the great work.
Oh, that's wonderful.
There you go.
That's great. Beautiful. All right, then may I please have a motion and a second that the board approves the textbooks as listed in your agenda that were presented at the November 15th, 2022 meeting.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments on that? All those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you. And then we have policies just for second read, right? Okay, because
Yes.
last time I messed it up. All right, so do we have any comments on those?
No.
No, okay. All right, so we have two policies up for second read and approval tonight, 7670 and 7680. May I please have a motion and a second that those policies be approved as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments on that? All those in favor? All right, all in favor, none opposed. Awesome. All right, so that leads us to our committee reports. Mark, were you able to attend Labor Relations, and would you like to speak on that?
I was able to go to Labor Relations. The presentation, interestingly enough, it was about electric buses.
Oh, okay, good.
Gates Tri did a great presentation, and they even brought a bus for us to take a ride in.
Oh, wow.
So,
Ooh.
and there's some pictures on the Monroe County School Board Association with the bus. Interesting things, I'll just do a couple little points. The bus looks like a regular bus. I mean, you'd think it would look like some kind of Tesla bus. It's a bus. Okay. And of course, part of that
It's
is
not
the
fancy.
economies. If you know the bus platform is big and it's got a lot of flexibility, but so they can use the same chassis, a lot of the same equipment, which makes it familiar to students, familiar to drivers. You know, it's economical versus creating a whole new bus. So it's really just a drivetrain that's different. And it drives like a bus. It's just quiet. So that's it. The other thing that's interesting, as I say, the chassis is the same. So when you talk about what goes bad on our buses, it's not the engine, it's the chassis. We're going to have electric buses, it's going to be the same chassis. So for better or for worse, that's the way it's going to be. So what the presentation was, let me go to the right spot here. Gates Tri started this before the grants came along, before the mandate, rather I'll say mandate, but whatever, the mandate from Hochul to switch to buses, electric buses, came into place. They did it on their own. The grants, those grants weren't in place at the time, and so they had to find other grants to do that. And they had to go through some hoops to get that money. You know, it's not really worth going into the details here, but it was not straightforward. They went to a lot of extra work that has been smoothed out through these new processes for getting buses. Hopefully they're a lot more smoother. Well, you were there, weren't you, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think hopefully it's a lot smoother. It'll be smoother for us than what they had to go through. They had delays. They had delays with getting the bus. You know, we're talking about supply chain stuff. And if they don't get a bus, if it waits too long, then there's a matter of like the eligibility for the grant or the aid would expire, and then they had all these kinds of issues. They're getting, when it comes to about the electric part of it, they're getting about 100 miles per charge, which meets their needs. They can manage their routes to do that. They can charge it up at night, and if they need to during the day, they can manage the charging. They did do extra purchases, like they bought buses with battery maintenance systems to help maintain that health of the battery. Just like on your iPhone, you know, there's settings to make sure you extend the life of the battery, the same kind of thing. They also worked with they had the manufacturer work with them and work with the fire department on how to deal with bus issues, bus accidents, bus fires. As you can recall, when Teslas first came out, first responders didn't necessarily know how to deal with those things, and they would cut through high voltage cables, or they would try to add water to a lithium fire, which is not what you do. And so they were proactive by getting the first responders, the fire department, involved when they got the bus. And they're also working with RG&E, because RG&E was learning on how to support buses. So they really have blazed a lot of trails that I think we can all learn from. And as our our neighbors, we can learn from them. I think as the state will learn from them, the other service providers like first responders, RG&E, they're learning. So they really did the hard work, and they were able to share that with us. Now, they don't know some unknowns. What especially is they don't know what the resale value of these buses are going to be. One part of this, we keep our buses for 10 years. The resale value has a curve where it drops off. I'm not sure what percentage of that is for our buses at 10 years, but what's it going to be for an electric bus? It could be more, it could be less, it could be, at this point, there's really no telling, which comes into the overall cost factor of a bus when we go to replace it with a new bus. So there's a lot of unknowns, but, it was good information.
So they have how many? Just one?
I think they just have one right
Okay.
now. Is that correct?
They have two.
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 I think they're getting 2 more this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a good study for us. Yeah. That's cool you got to write it. That's fun. Thank you. Are there questions for Mark? No? No questions? All right. And then we have Legislative Committee.
That was me. Sorry, folks, I was not able to attend that meeting. And as far as I know, the agenda for that meeting was to keep working on policies, to give them a final run-through and submit them, and then sign up for December 5th. There was a Zoom meeting with legislators, which I also did not attend, and we don't have the minutes yet of what happened. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then we have, Executive Committee. That was, Tom and I attended the Executive Committee. And that was actually after Legislative Committee, so they talked a little bit about, we approved the position papers from Legislative at Executive Committee. Not close enough to my mic, sorry. And we had an Executive Director update, and she talked about having the opportunity at the Monroe County School Board Association conference to have the first time meeting with other area executive directors of other local, whatever.
School district associations.
Yeah, other local associations in other areas of the state, and how that she felt that was really productive to connect with other groups and kind of see what other groups are doing. Another plug for the the website work that they're doing, especially for our newer members. We used to get a lot of emails, so all the minutes from all the other meetings, her executive report every month, all that is really located on the website. So they're really trying to drive some traffic, and I promised I would do another plug for the website at the meeting. I do think she talked about doing a survey. Is that correct? And so I'll try to make sure when I see it to send that out, because they're really trying to make sure that they're working with the membership and giving us what we need for professional development and with the committee meetings and the like. And they're working on a new logo soon. And is there anything, what am I missing? I feel like I'm missing something.
Just budget-wise, things.
Oh, right, right.
They talked about the big piece, and we've also touched upon it, is like the cost for them really is paper, in terms of just that cost. And for the facts and figure guide, they did get some more revenue through ads, full-page ads, through the facts and figure book that Monroe County School Board Association puts out about all the school districts. So once that's hot off the press, you'll all get a copy of it like we do every year. So, but it was just that they're okay budget-wise, but they don't see major impacts. But just again, the cost of paper and printing has really increased.
And that reminds me, they brought on a legislative liaison to help with some of the meetings in Albany. Because it's only the two of them in the office. It's right.
I can't remember.
I forgot, but they were really excited about it, to do some work with the position papers, because there's so many this year, and just advocacy efforts for the group, and
I actually do remember who it is. but I'm going to make you go to the webpage because they really want you to get to the webpage. So I
That's
do
very
know,
good.
go to,
Well,
no, I
I
don't remember.
have to say, as a new board member, I really like that website.
Yeah.
You know, I can go check out things and it's the acronyms, man. Yeah.
Right.
Those
I
are,
think they listened. I think it's, as a member, as I sit in the executive committee and a member of Monroe County School Board Association as a superintendent, I do see them listening because it becomes information overload. We know that, with emails. It's one of the reasons districts are continuing to shift to things like Parent Square, where at least it's one place and you can go and quickly find,
It's all in one place.
I get I get every Parent Square in the district plus my own as a parent. So I miss them sometimes, but I know you can go to one app. I can find everything by student, by school, what was sent to one, every grade level. And I think they really heard that. And so the web page is great because you don't have to search for an email that went out with the minutes. Everything's in one location. So
Yeah, it's about,
good
for
feedback.
me, being being on for a while, I have to remember to go.
Yeah.
Like, it's getting in the habit of going to check the website. Yeah.
That's my issue,
Right,
too.
right, because it was so used to get the email, and so it would prompt me to read the minutes, and, yeah, so it's trying to get into that habit, I think, of going.
And I
And
used to find the old website hard to navigate.
Right, right. This one's much nicer. Yeah, yeah.
Great.
Awesome. Questions for myself or Tom on any of that? No? All right. All right, and then we had our in-district committee. We had a code of conduct meeting on November 17th. And do you want to talk about that? You and I were
Sure.
there.
Yeah. I highlighted a couple of things here. Let's see. Some time was put into why the different codes of conduct between the sort of regular code of conduct and the athletic code of conduct. There was a lot of energy around seeing other examples of code of conducts because it's felt like ours is dated, the language is dated, it's not organized well, just different sort of physical things like that. And also access to it is, nobody knows where it is, and
Right.
Yet it's referred to all the time.
Right.
The issue of a lack of consistency between schools and between teachers. This teacher lets me do that, but this teacher doesn't let me do that. And sometimes, of course, that has to be true, but does it have to be true all the time? The need for an introduction with a philosophy statement in the beginning, so it sort of sets the tone for things like the culturally responsive and learning framework and deficit and asset-based responses, like having all of that in the beginning so people know the foundation of the document. So that's just a few highlights.
Yeah, no, it was great.
Did I forget anything?
I think that was really great. I think you really highlighted it well. I mean, I always love that our students speak, that we have students from the high school in Bay Trail that come to the meeting, and to hear them say, like, this teacher does this, and, it's...
Yeah, they were very animated around the dress code.
Yeah, they were. They were. It was funny. Yeah, right. Tasha, do you have anything to add to that?
I think what's most important is the fact that we're digging in and we're paying attention to the places that we need to improve. And so this past meeting was really an opportunity to take a look at two sections, section 8 and 11, and look for what are the exclusionary practices that we have, where is the subjective language that we may have embedded in the code. And so just having a number of stakeholders in the room, right? So we have faculty, we have families, we have students, and utilizing their voice as part of how we're adjusting and modifying our code of conduct is huge. So I just think over time, we're going to find a code of conduct that brings the consistency, because there is a great deal of inconsistency across our schools. But more importantly, have it accessible to families and have it family, faculty, student friendly. So if you pick it up, you're able to know exactly where you see yourself represented in the code of conduct and what is our role and responsibility, and how do we name that for each one of our stakeholders. So great work. I look forward to each month when we come together. We have a meeting next Thursday, and we'll, of course, update the board on that one in January when we have some information from there. But I think it's just pushing us in a really good direction.
Well, I think it's really aligned with what our principals were talking about today, and really about building a community around the code, right? To build a community, not about like somebody tells you how to do this and that. Not because somebody told you, but because we're building this community and we want to treat each other in this way, right? Yeah, yeah. So it's really great work. It's really great work. Questions, board members on that? No? All right. So I don't think we have any unfinished business. Do we have any new business this evening? No? All right. So then I say we're going to make a motion and a second to adjourn at 8:49 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor? All right. Awesome. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.